I'm Steve Millard. I'm the president of the Greater Akron Chamber. And again, I've got a couple of special guests with me today from the Ohio Department of Development who are going to talk about some really great resources that are available and still very available, if you will, for our businesses in Greater Akron and throughout the state to help with recovery from COVID. We know many different sectors were impacted differently by COVID, and the state has been really committed to making sure that the resources that are flowing into our state are getting into our communities and down into the hands of our businesses so they can best recover from the impact of the pandemic. The resources through the different grant programs that have already happened, not only at the state level, but at the local level, have been super helpful to lots of businesses, and there is still more need. So we want to make sure this money does not go unspent. My goal is to make sure none of that money goes back anywhere to the federal government or any place else to the state. I want to spend it all in the region and make sure our businesses here have as much support as possible. So today with me, I've got Director Lydia Mahalik, who is the Director of the Ohio Department of Development, and John Workman is also with us today, and he's going to speak about some of the details of the program. John is kind of one of the guys behind the scenes making all this happen for us as the Assistant Chief of the Business Services Division for the Department of Development. So, and then once we get through that and John provides an outline of some of these programs, we're going to take as many questions as you have. We want to make sure you know enough about the program to apply for it and get access to some of these resources. So let me start with a couple of quick introductions. And we've had some bios linked to the registration links for this program today. But I'll start with introducing Lydia Mahalik, who is the Director of the Ohio Department of Development, as I said, which up until recently was called the Ohio Development Services Agency. Director Mahalik is a cabinet member for Governor DeWine. She leads the state's effort to help our businesses, large and small, as they try to figure out their moves in the global economy. Prior to this role, she was an executive herself. She was the 55th mayor of the city of Findlay. She was a big proponent of Small Business Development Center, workforce development. It really helped to propel her own community to success. She's a 2010 graduate of the Joanne Davidson Leadership Institute and a 2010 graduate of the Government Leadership Academy. She serves on the Hancock County Red Cross Board of Directors, as well as the Board of Directors for the Partnership for Excellence, and is very actively involved in driving things forward for not only the state, but her community. She's currently a board member for the Ohio Mayors Alliance, which is a collaboration of Ohio's 20 largest cities, and she served on the advisory board for the U.S. Conference of Mayors and appointed chair of the U.S. Conference of Mayors Standing Committee on Children, Health, and Human Services. And since 2018, she served as vice chair of that body's Women Mayors Leadership Alliance. In addition, we have John Workman with us today. He joined the Ohio Department of Development, formerly, as I said, the DSA, in February of 2014, and he started out as manager of tax incentives. And then in January 2018, he was promoted to the Assistant Chief of the Business Services Division. And in that role, he oversaw tax incentives, grants, loan programs, including the Historic Preservation Tax Credit. Thank you for that, John. That's been a big boon to a lot of communities in terms of rebuilding our communities, and the local government safety capital grant programs. In 2019, he was actually promoted to Chief of the Business Services Division, where he oversees our Ohio's economic, small business, and technology-based development efforts, making sure that we are doing the right things for those constituents and those companies. He has a history as an appeals attorney with the Ohio Department of Taxation, dealing with a lot of the corporation franchise tax, personal income tax, pass-through entity taxes, and he really, his primary responsibilities included their managing staff attorneys and drafting all kinds of appeals and those filed by taxpayers throughout Ohio. He's a graduate of Ohio University, go Bobcats, with a bachelor's degree in economics and political science, and received his law degree from the University of Toledo College of Law. So again, two very knowledgeable, very seasoned public servants here who are really working hard for our businesses in the state. Director, I'm going to turn it over to you to make a few comments before we hear from John.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks, Steve. And good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. We appreciate the opportunity. Really, we're jazzed up about telling you more details about these programs. Look, these are resources that we really want you to be able to take advantage of. They are big in terms of the dollar amount, and we think they are very timely. We want to get them into your hands. And John is going to tell you more about them. They're really, really easy to access as well. And John is actually the perfect guy to lead the distribution of these programs. He's done a great job. We've been very busy at development, helping over the last, I would say, what seems like forever, but I'm sure it seems even longer for you all. We've been trying hard to get these dollars out the door in different tranches, trying to really meet the needs of businesses as the opportunities have presented themselves. And we are grateful, Steve, for the opportunity to really talk in more detail about really these investing in Ohio's future initiatives from Governor DeWine and Lieutenant Governor Husted. And quite frankly, we appreciate all of the hard work that goes into what the services that the Greater Akron Chamber does for its constituency. Obviously it's been a challenging few months, and your communication with your members has been vital. It's been a lifeline to businesses, both big and small. And this is just another great example of how we can get that great information out to businesses so they can put it to work. We are very optimistic about where Ohio's economy is going, about where it's performing right now, and what its future holds. We're very happy about where our financial position is, particularly at the state level. We just got some really good news from Fitch in terms of our bond outlook. The first increase in that rating in a really, really long time. And so we think that's some great third-party validation about where we are and where we're headed. And really that's supported by the overall Ohio economy, which you all help drive. So thank you for that. As we continue to look at Ohio's unemployment rate, although we know that workforce continues to be a huge challenge for all of us, including those of us at development. We continue to have an all hands on deck approach at trying to figure that out. Our unemployment rate still looks good compared to the national unemployment rate. New business filings continue to go up. We've had an unprecedented number of new business filings. A lot of that has to do with just the spirit of entrepreneurship that is present here in the state of Ohio. Our small business development centers across the state are really busy. Last week, I had the opportunity to visit a couple of them. Their business coaches are doing a lot of work with folks. Not only helping them access programs like John is going to talk about, but a lot of folks are looking to access more capital and to get, and to work smarter and harder at really trying, to get to market and to be successful. And we're happy at development that we can be helpful in that space as well. We've had a lot of really big wins in terms of like the larger business case scenario. I would say just a couple of days ago, we had a big win over in Northwest Ohio. A lot of people are familiar with Peloton. They're opening up their very first North American manufacturing facility. They're just south of Toledo. That's a really big win for a state like Ohio. And it's a really big win for the United States in general. And we're really happy that we won it in the state. And again, we are happy to say that we believe that the climate, that the environment here within the state is conducive for not only that type of investment, but a great environment that's conducive for small to medium-sized business investment and growth as well. We really, really want you to take advantage of these programs that John's going to talk more about. He and his team have been working very hard to do this expeditiously. They want to work with you to make sure that we get all of the material that we need. We've tried hard to make sure that it's a streamlined application to the extent really that we just need a few items here, and he'll tell you more about that. We really started accepting applications for these grants at the end of June. with more than $310 million that's available to be able to help businesses. And 6 weeks later, more than half of that money is still available. And this is really money that can help businesses keep their doors open. It can help meet payroll. It can help really sustain themselves for the future. So far, more than 80 Summit County businesses have been approved for funding, and there are more that are actually awaiting review by our staff. Again, John's going to go over the details of the programs and how to apply, but I also want to highlight some of the other ways that we at Development can help our business community. Again, across the state of Ohio, there are more than 20 small business development centers. There in the Akron area, that's located at the Summit Medina Business Alliance. And the advisors there at the SBDC can help with business planning. Obviously, they can help with access to capital and so much more. We're coming into the new budget season for us at the state level. And we've got a couple of new business programs that are going to be available. One in particular for women-owned businesses, the other for minority-owned businesses. We've got programs that are specific for our minority and disadvantaged business owners, and there's assistance through the Minority Business Assistance Center at the Akron Urban League, and advisors can help those businesses receive state certifications, as well as provide information on the state's Minority Business Direct Loan and the Minority Business Bonding Program. Development also, and we do not do a good enough job, and we're going to get better at this. And John knows this because we were actually working on this prior to the pandemic hitting. But development also has some really great experts who can help businesses with helping to export their products. That can also help really reach into new markets internationally. We have contractors in different places all over the globe. So reach out to us at Development in John's shop if this is something that you would be interested in doing. We live in a global marketplace, and there are lots of Ohio companies that can compete in that space. And we would love to talk to you more about how the resources at Development can help you be successful. All of these different resources can be accessed through an SBDC, a Small Business Development Center, or an MBAC. And best of all of these services, they're available to you at no cost, which is super great, especially when you're a small business and you could be just getting started. So again, thanks for your time this morning. We're very grateful for the effort that you're putting forth here. And Steve, thank you so much. And with that, I'm going to let John talk about these new business programs, and I'll stick around for a few minutes here, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has. So John, take it away and let them know about these programs, would you?
Thank you very much, Director. Absolutely. So thank you very much, Steve and John as well, for getting this set up. Excited to be here and share information about these programs this morning. So John Workman, Chief of the Business Services Division here at Development. Just briefly, the Director mentioned a lot of things that we do here in the Business Services Division, but tax incentives, loans, grants, like the programs we're going to talk about here today, ton of different support vehicles for small businesses, like the Director said, small business development centers, export assistance, procurement technical assistance to help businesses get government contracts, and manufacturing assistance as well. And then finally, we also house the Ohio Third Frontier, helping to advance technologies all across the state of Ohio. So again, I'm really excited to be here today to talk about these programs. I will bring up the PowerPoint that I have here. All right. So we are calling these programs the Investing in Ohio's Future programs. There are 4 new programs that have been created by the Ohio legislature. They were originally created last fiscal year by a couple of Senate bills that were passed, and then there was some additional funding that was approved for these programs as part of the biennial budget bill. So we have 4 new programs that we're administering. For those of you who remember the program we ran at the end of last year, our Small Business Relief Grant program, that one was a little bit more open-ended. It allowed basically any type of small business to apply as long as it met the requirements of the program. As you can see here, these programs are much more targeted. The legislature took a look at what was happening as a result of COVID-19. Obviously, we've all heard everything that's happening to small businesses across the state. And it was determined that these are the types of small businesses that most needed support from the state, most needed some grant support as we continue to deal with the ongoing effects of COVID-19. So first one is food and beverage establishment grant. Obviously, those businesses have been severely impacted, lodging grant, entertainment venue grant, and then new small business grant. So the food and beverage grant, the lodging grant, and the entertainment venue grant are all very, very similar in terms of their requirements. The new small business grant is a little bit different. So I'll spend a good amount of time going over the food and beverage grant first. I'll point out some of the differences in the lodging grant and the entertainment venue grant, and then we'll spend a little bit more time on the new small business grant to talk exactly about how that program works. So the first one is the food and beverage establishment grant. As I said, $100 million was approved last fiscal year, and another $100 million was approved as part of the biennial budget. Grants are up to $30,000 depending on the business's loss of revenue in 2020 when measured against 2019. There are a lot of different businesses that can qualify for this program, and it's both for-profit and nonprofit businesses. There is not a restriction on what type of business you are. Nonprofits can also qualify for this program, but exactly as it sounds, we're looking for restaurants, we're looking for bars, we're looking for caterers. I know there's a question about whether or not caterers are eligible. They are. Coffee shops, cafeterias, buffets, retail bakery establishments, commercial bakeries that sell to businesses would not be eligible, but all types of different businesses is what we're looking for here in this program. The biggest thing that folks are going to have to prove with their application is that they were subject to at least a 10% revenue reduction when comparing 2019 to 2020. So we'll talk a little bit more about some of the things that are required as part of the application as we get into that process, but that is one of the biggest eligibility requirements and one of the things that applicants are required to prove as part of their application. Applicants have to have at least one physical location in Ohio. Obviously, we only want to incentivize Ohio businesses through this program. Applicants are going to have any of the following: a vendor's license, a food service operation license, or a liquor license. That is a required attachment for the application as well. We'll talk about that. We want them to be in good standing, obviously, with the other agencies across the state, Secretary of State, Department of Taxation, those sort of things, and they will attest to that fact as part of their application. And then we'll talk a little bit more about this as part of the process of the program. But we are requiring folks to register as a supplier with the Ohio Office of Budget and Management for purposes of receiving payment, which makes things a lot easier for both the awardee and for us as an agency as well. So again, the big focus of this program is sale and revenue reduction. And it's going to be the focus for this program and the entertainment venue grant program. Lodging is very, very similar. It's just the measurement piece is different. It's occupancy as opposed to revenue, but we're doing the calculation basically the exact same way. So for these programs, we do require that the business has been in existence since at least December 1st of 2019. Why December 1st of 2019? We need to have at least something to measure against for purposes of revenue loss. So we wanted to see at least 1 month of revenue in 2019 so that we can measure the revenue loss between 2019 and 2020. And our system does that automatically. We've put some formulas in place. Basically what the system is doing is it's calculating an average monthly revenue in 2019 and comparing that to an average monthly revenue in 2020 to calculate a loss percentage. And that loss percentage will dictate the award amount. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go through. How can the funds be used if you are awarded? There are a number of different eligible uses for this program. Basically anything you would spend money on that's related to your business. PPE for employees or customers. Measures taken to protect customers from COVID-19. So if you're erecting barriers or doing those different types of things, those are eligible costs. Mortgage or rent payments for business locations, utility payments for business locations, salary for your employees, and business supplies or equipment. And you can use these funds to either reimburse yourself for costs that have already been incurred, or you can use the funds to cover costs that you're going to incur in the future as well. Either one of those are okay. There are some ineligible costs, obviously, we don't want you using these grant funds for. Tax obligations, we don't want you to use the grant funds to pay taxes. Non-business purposes, clearly these grant funds are intended to benefit the business. Political purposes, and then increased compensation for the business owners. Those are the types of things that we do not want folks to utilize these grant funds for. As the director indicated, we opened the application for all 4 of these programs on June 29th. It has been open since then. We have been receiving applications. One of the things I wasn't particularly proud of when we did the small business relief grant at the end of last year is that because of the time crunch we were put on, we didn't have the ability to provide adequate customer service to the folks that we were trying to get these grant funds out to. So we have absolutely rectified that this time around. For each of the 4 programs, as you can see here, we have a specific email address that is assigned to each of those 4 programs, and my staff and myself personally are manning those email inboxes on a daily basis. So at most, folks are typically receiving a response in a couple of hours. Maximum is going to be a day or 2 that folks are going to receive a response. So we're all about customer service with these programs, helping folks on the front end and then also helping folks on the back end. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through the process of awarding and talk about that a little bit more.
Hey, John, can I just ask you a quick question? You said something
absolutely.
about the things that are eligible. Is a replacement of lost owner income eligible for this grant, or is it just wages and salaries of employees?
I think we would be perfectly fine with a replacement of lost income. Now, again, obviously, if typically they pay themselves $10,000 and instead they feel like they want to pay themselves $20,000 with this grant funds, we don't want that to occur. But if there are, wages or revenue that the business owner would have otherwise received in the past, if they didn't, they could use that to come.
Income, you mean income, right? Not revenue.
Yeah, income. Yes,
Income.
absolutely.
Yep. So the Schedule C entry that they might have from their past taxes or something like that. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. So talking a little bit about the application process. So businesshelp.ohio.gov. I will try and mention that website a couple times throughout this presentation, businesshelp.ohio.gov. That's where you can find information about all 4 of these programs. You can find the terms and conditions. You can find fact sheets. You can find FAQs, and you can also find a link to the application itself. And as the director said, we've tried to make this application process as simple as we possibly can. You will have to register for an OHID if you don't already have one, but that is all done electronically via ohid.ohio.gov. So that is what you will use to log into the application. Once you log into the application, you'll be asked to provide the business name and the tax ID number, whether that be, excuse me, an FEIN or a social security number. Both are acceptable for these programs. And then you will be asked to go ahead and start the application and pick which program you are going to apply for. So the application links all take you to the same place. We have one application built that houses all 4 of the different programs. You identify which program you're applying for as part of that first phase of the application process. Once you get to the application, the terms and conditions really do lay out exactly the fields that we're going to ask you for. And then most importantly, the 3 attachments that we're going to ask you for each of the different programs. So again, for the first page of the application, it's basically just who are you, a little bit of business demographic information, your NAICS code, tell us what type of business you're running. So a text box entry, very simple. Tell us what year your business was established. Tell us whether or not you've received funding from other pandemic relief programs, just for statistical purposes. That does not have any impact whatsoever on your eligibility for these programs. We're just collecting that information. Tell us about your business ownership, the demographics of your business ownership, all those kinds of things. So again, that's all just background information about who you are, collecting a little bit of statistical information about the business. And then you're going to tell us who we are going to communicate for purposes of these programs. All communication for these programs is done via email. So the number one thing I tell folks, check, double check, triple check that email address that you put on that first page of the application, because if it's not correct, you're not going to get our communications telling you that your application has been approved or rejected. Telling you about the next parts of the process to be able to move forward to getting your grant funds. So make sure that that email address that you provide is accurate. On the next tab of the application, that's where we get a little bit more specific. So we're going to ask you to tell us, where is the business located? So again, has to be an Ohio address. And we realize that we have a circumstance, especially under the Food and Beverage Establishment Grant Program, where we might have businesses that have multiple locations that could be eligible for grant funds under one federal employer identification number, the tax ID number. Our system only allows folks to file one application per tax ID number. So what the application does is it allows folks to add multiple locations to one application. So for example, we had a company that submitted an application. He owns 12 Subway franchises. He was able to list all 12 of those Subway franchises on one application. Now, you do have to prove eligibility for each of those locations individually. So we're going to ask you to identify those locations by their address. We're going to ask you to include attachments that are specific to each one of those 3 locations. So while you can include multiple locations on one application, you do still have to prove that each one of those locations is individually eligible. So the biggest thing that my staff is spending time on when they review these applications are the 3 required attachments. There are 3 required attachments for every single program. They vary a little bit, but overall they're generally the same. So for the food and beverage grant and for the entertainment venue grant, attachment 1 is basically just verify to us that you had a reduction in revenue. We're going to ask you on the application to tell us what was your 2019 revenue, what was your 2020 revenue. For those businesses that weren't open for the entire year of 2019, we have a way to take care of that. There will be some additional questions on the application that will get some information from you about that to make sure we're doing the calculation correctly. But again, the big thing is show us that you actually did have the revenue that you're claiming in your application. There's a number of different documents that we will accept for that. Tax returns, obviously, that's always a good way to prove it. Financial statements, audited, reviewed, compiled, whatever the level might be, or internal accounting records. We know that a lot of our small businesses in Ohio still utilize Excel, QuickBooks, whatever it might be to keep track of their businesses, and that's perfectly fine. If you can show us the number that you're reporting in your internal accounting system, we will go ahead and allow that to happen. The next item that we're asking folks for across all applications is basically just proof that you're still operating, proof that you're still an operating business, that you've incurred business costs in the last 60 days. Show us that you've made payroll in the last 60 days. Show us that you've paid a utility bill in the last 60 days, you've paid your rent or mortgage, you've bought supplies or equipment. Again, just making sure that we are actually giving these grant funds to businesses that are still operating here in the state of Ohio. And then the final item is what we talked about from the eligibility, a copy of a license, vendor's license, food service license, liquor license, one of the three, don't need all three, any one of the three qualifies. So you'll submit your application after you go on, and my staff will review. We're reviewing applications as we speak. The biggest volume that we have is in the food and beverage establishment grant, so that's taking us a little bit longer to get through. We have reviewed all applications that have been submitted for the lodging grant and the entertainment venue grant, and we're continuing to work on the new small business relief grant as well. So we continue to work through those. Once we review your application, again, we're going to focus on those three attachments. Do they hit the requirements of the terms and conditions? If they do, you're going to get the email that you want to see from us, which is an approval notification, and that's going to give you the next steps that you need to move through. The biggest thing is, again, you need to go to the Ohio Office of Budget and Management, get a supplier ID, come back into your application and provide that number for us so that we can make sure you get paid. So the approval process is pretty simple. We'll notify you, work with OBM to get a supplier ID. We have contact information in the email for you to be able to do that. Come back to your application, give us your supplier ID, and we'll move forward with getting you your grant funds. If the application is rejected, this is again where kind of our customer service piece comes in. We're going to notify you that your application is rejected, and we're going to tell you why your application was rejected. The first time we did this at the end of last year, we basically just said one of the attachments was wrong. We're giving you more detail this time. For example, the second attachment is not a document type that meets the terms and conditions, or it's unreadable, or it's password protected. We're going to tell you exactly why your application was rejected. If you need additional information and trying to correct that application, reach out to the email inbox for the program that you're working with. We will help you. We will try and figure out a way to get you approved for these funds as long as you can provide the necessary documentation. Once your application, if your application is rejected, you do have the ability to go in and resubmit that application at any time, making any corrections to the errors that are identified in the email that you receive. We will go back through, we will re-review, and you will receive a new notification from us. Now, folks that are resubmitting applications are technically moving to the back of the line. So for a number of the programs, that doesn't matter. Food and beverage, it is going to be a little bit before we get a chance to get back and review your application, but we're working through those as quickly as we possibly can.
Can I ask you a question? It might be able to ask up. So somebody, if they've got the Ohio supplier ID, but the person who is indicated on the email is no longer with them, is it easy to go in and edit those profiles so they can get the right email information into their ID for their application?
The best thing to do would be to send an email to the appropriate program inbox, and we can make that change for you. I think most of the stuff, once it's in there, is locked in, but we can make those changes on behalf of folks.
Okay, and if they are applying for one of these grants for the first time, but they maybe applied before for one of the other business grants, can they just put the new email address in there and it updates, or they have to go back to the supplier ID and do that?
No, they'll be able to do it right there on the application. It won't automatically link to anything previously they've done. Okay,
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's talk about what everybody wants to know, the award amounts, right? How do we calculate the award amounts? So it's basically a formula that the system follows based on this stance. So it's based on the calculated amount of revenue reduction that we do when we look at your 2019 versus your 2020. Again, you have to have at least a 10% loss. I also will tell you that our system does round up. So if you have a 9.5% loss, our system is going to recognize that as a 10% loss. You're still okay. You will not be shut out because you have a 9.5% loss. Anywhere between 10 and 30% loss, we're giving you a $10,000 grant. Anywhere between 31 and 50%, that's a $20,000 grant. Anything over 51% is a $30,000 grant. Now, the only caveat to that is that we are limiting it based on the amount of your loss that you actually incurred. So for example, let's say I have a business that earned $50,000 in 2019 and then earned $24,000 in 2020. That is in excess of a 51% loss. I would otherwise be entitled to a $30,000 grant. However, we are not going to take you up and above and beyond what you actually earned in 2019. So instead, we would just give you $26,000 to basically make you whole for 2019 versus 2020. Otherwise, you will see the grant amounts being a standard $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, depending on the loss of revenue. We had originally set aside a certain amount of funding for each of the programs for each of Ohio's 88 counties, as we call them, the county allocations. Those really only matter if we had received enough applications to utilize all the funding, which we have not. Plenty of funding is available in all the programs, so we are funding everybody that is eligible on a first come, first served basis. If you believe you're eligible, take a look at the terms and conditions, reach out to us at the email address provided. We will work with you to try and make sure that you get the funds if you're entitled to them. So flipping over to the lodging grant, again, most of what you saw in the food and beverage grant is exactly the same as it is in the lodging grant, with one small caveat. For-profit, nonprofit, we're okay with both here. For this program, obviously, we're focused on hotels, motels, bed and breakfast operations, and it's only those operations that are licensed as hotels by the Ohio Department of Commerce. So one of the things that you are required to provide as part of this program, you're not required to provide a vendor's license, food service operation, liquor license. Instead, you are required to provide that license that a hotel receives from the Ohio Department of Commerce. Very similarly to what we did in the food and beverage grant program, we are calculating the award amount based on a reduction, but it's a reduction in occupancy rate as opposed to revenue. So hoteliers are telling us what their occupancy rate was in 2019, which is an average daily. They're telling us what their average daily occupancy rate was in 2020. And our system does a very simple calculation to determine what the percentage reduction is and calculate the appropriate award amount. So again, the attachments for this program, the first attachment we're going to want to see is basically verification of the occupancy rates that you're telling us for 2019 and 2020. So most people have systems that keep track of this, annual reports they do on a regular basis anyways, and they've provided us a copy of those reports, which works perfectly fine. We do ask companies in this program to provide us proof of costs incurred in the last 60 days. So that is a similar attachment to the food and beverage grant. And then again, the final attachment for this one is the hotel license issued by the Ohio Department of Commerce. And then the award amounts for this program, very, very similar to food and beverage. $10,000 for a 10 to 30% loss, $20,000 for a 31 to 50% loss, $30,000 for a 51% or greater loss when you look at occupancy rates, 2019 compared to 2020. And then flipping over to the entertainment venue grant. So this program, I think, is probably closer to the food and beverage establishment grant, calculated based on loss of revenue in 2020 when compared to 2019. What are the types of businesses that we're looking for this program? Movie theaters, dinner theaters, music venues, both indoor and outdoor, comedy clubs, concert halls, spectator sports venues, museums, art centers and galleries, historical sites, zoos, amusement parks, family fun centers, trampoline parks, golf courses, the list goes on and on. So we tried to develop the list as much as we possibly could, but I don't think we thought of everything. So if a business that you're working with or that you own is not specifically on that list, reach out to us. We'll have a conversation about whether or not that would qualify for the program, and we can look into that a little bit more. Again, this program, very, very similar to food and beverage. The attachments are exactly the same. Show us the revenue amounts for 2019 and 2020 that you listed on your application. Show us that you've been in business for the last 60 days, you're incurring business costs. Provide us with a copy of your vendor's food service or liquor permit license. And we are able to review and approve those applications. So that program, again, very, very similar to the food and beverage program. And then the final program we're talking about, which is a little bit different from the others, is the new small business grant. It's a little bit more akin to what we did with the small business relief grant at the end of last year. We have $20 million in funding for this program. The grant amounts for this program are a flat $10,000 for all applicants. So there's no measurement of revenue or occupancy reduction, anything like that. It's targeted for businesses that opened between January 1st of 2020 and December 31st of 2020. And one of the things that you're going to be required to do as part of the application is to prove that your business started in that window. And there's a number of different ways that we're allowing folks to do that, because we recognize that businesses might do things at different times. Like you might go ahead and register with the Secretary of State a month or two in advance of actually getting your business up and running, or signing your lease, or purchasing equipment, supplies, that sort of thing. So there are 5 different documents that we will accept to prove that a business opened in calendar year 2020. One is a Secretary of State registration in that time frame. Another is a certificate from the Bureau of Workers' Compensation that you earn upon hiring your first employee. So if you have that in calendar year 2020, we'll accept that. Vendor's license registration in calendar year 2020, we will accept that. Commercial activities tax registration along with submission of your first tax return in calendar year 2020, we will accept that. And then establishment of a business bank account along with your first deposit sometime in calendar year 2020, we will accept that as well. So that's the first attachment that is required as part of this program. And again, really goes to proving that this is just businesses that opened between January 1st, 2020 and December 31st, 2020. One other caveat on this program, we are focused only on for-profit businesses for this program. So nonprofits are eligible for all three of the other programs. They are not eligible for the new small business grant program. And then this program, again, very similar to what we did for the small business relief grant at the end of last year, does have a W-2 employee requirement. So again, limited funding. We wanted to make sure that these funds had the most impact possible. So the decision was made to apply these funds to employer firms that opened within this window. And that's another item that we'll be verifying as part of the application. The second attachment that we're going to ask folks for is basically to verify that they do have W-2 employees as of January 1st, 2021. And then finally, the third attachment for this program is the same as it has been for the other programs. Show us that the business is still in operation, that you've incurred business costs in the last 60 days, that you are still operating, and we are still free to give you this $10,000 in grant funds. So that's kind of my brief overview of all the four programs. So some of the highlights, again, businesshelp.ohio.gov. That's where you're going to find all the information about these programs. That's where you're going to find the 4 email addresses that you're going to want to know if you want to reach out to my staff that is waiting for these programs to come in, these emails to come in, so that we can respond to you and help you out. And look at the 3 attachments. That's the biggest thing that I always try and tell folks. When folks ask me, what is the biggest tips you can give to folks who are looking to apply for these programs? Take a look at the terms and conditions, look at the attachments that we're requiring, make sure that what you're attaching to the system matches up with what we're saying in the terms and conditions. And also, we also have the language about the attachments right there in the application as well. So as you get to that page of the application where it asks you for the attachments, it'll give you that outline of exactly what we're looking for based on which program you're applying for. So that really is kind of the biggest tip that I would have for folks as they look to apply for these programs. I know that there were a couple of other questions that kind of came in before we had the webinar. So for example, are there any grant options for startups? Depends on when you started. Maybe if you started in 2020, so take a look at the small business grant program to see if that might be a fit for you. We talked a little bit about the new small business grant and how you can qualify depending on when you opened. There are a couple of different options to do that. So take a look at that and see if any of those will work for you. Which of the 4 grants will be best for a minority female-owned company? All of them, any of them. As long as you can meet the terms and conditions, we're more than happy to service any type of business that comes in through those programs, regardless of ownership. All 4 of the programs work great. I would be remiss if I didn't quickly mention that we are working to stand up some new loan programs through our Office of Minority Business, Chief Eric Seabrook. So keep an ear out for those as well for the minority and women-owned businesses. There will be some additional financing opportunities coming for you through the Department of Development, so keep your ears open for those. Timelines, so that's a very good question. So like I said, we opened the application on June 29th. We kind of took a pause for the first week or 2 after the application opened because I wanted to make sure that we could deliver that customer service. So I focused my folks solely on responding to emails that came in through the inbox for all 4 of the programs, and I'm really glad we did. I think it led to much more quality applications. Folks realized that we actually were there, we were listening, we were ready to respond to them when they had questions. So we started reviewing early July. As of now, we reviewed approximately 5,000 applications and we have approximately 3,500 left to go. Again, food and beverage grant is our biggest by volume by far. So that one is taking a little bit longer for us to get through. We were able to get through entertainment venue and the lodging grant pretty quickly because there was a smaller volume there. We're also still working on the new small business grant program. That one had a little bit larger volume, not quite the same volume as food and beverage, but we're trying to review the applications as quickly as we can. So depending on the program, you may have already heard back from us if you submitted an application, otherwise still waiting. My goal is to make sure we get through all the applications that we currently have by the end of the month, the very latest. We have all hands on deck here at the division working on these applications, including myself throughout the day, at night after I get the kids down, reviewing applications. So we're all working on it. We're all trying to get through them as quickly as we possibly can. Once you receive notification that you've been approved, again, you do have to work with the Office of Budget and Management to obtain a supplier ID if you don't already have one. That process right now, we're being told, is about 7 to 10 business days to get that turned around, potentially sooner as they continue to work through the backlog. And then payment timelines, somewhere between 10 to 20 business days, just kind of depending based on the volume of payments that we're receiving. So assuming you submit an approved application, from that point, you're probably looking at about 20 to 30 days to actually have the funds in your account or to have a check in your hand, as we work through the different parts and pieces of the process as we have to get through those.
Hey, John, let me just clarify on that. So
Yeah.
if I were to submit, sounds like you started receiving things at the end of June, and right now it's mid-August or so. You've got a backlog you want to get through, and by the end of August, it sounds like that backlog would be getting to the point where you say, yeah, you're approved, or you can move forward, and then there's processes after that. If I were to submit today or tomorrow, what would be my expectation for first hearing back? I know by program it's a little bit different. And then, the rest of that timeline would apply, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. So food and beverage grant or new small business grant, if you submit an application today, I would say you would receive a response within 2 to 3 weeks from today.
Okay.
And then from there, again, if you don't already have a supplier ID, if you have a supplier ID already, then that's going to cut down your time frame, obviously. If you don't, you're probably looking somewhere in 20, 30 days after approval to get your payment.
So I probably should do that simultaneously. Like if I applied today and I didn't have that supplier ID, I should just go ahead and do that and get that going as well.
You can. There's no cost to applying for a supplier ID, so there's no reason not to. We didn't want to generally put that out there so that the Office of Budget and Management was flooded with tens of thousands of requests for supplier IDs for folks that might not necessarily need them. But at this point, yeah, if you're pretty confident that you're eligible for the programs, you're going to be approved. There's no harm in doing that whatsoever.
Okay.
On the lodging grant and entertainment venue grant, honestly, if you were to submit an application today, I would be surprised if you didn't receive a response today. You'd definitely receive it tomorrow. So that one's just a lot quicker, again, because we've been able to work through the backlog, and now we're just maintaining as new applications come in.
It's helpful. Thank you.
So that's really all I had for the formal presentation. So happy to open it up to any questions that folks might have. Again, I sound like a broken record, but here it is, businesshelp.ohio.gov. That's all the information that you need on all 4 of the programs, the email links, the application button to get to the application itself. So that's where it's all at. That's where you can find help. That's where you can find our contact information. And that's where you can apply as well. So encourage folks to apply. And again, any questions whatsoever, please feel free to reach out to the email addresses that we have for each of the individual programs. Again, it's better for everybody if you have questions for you to reach out and ask those questions in advance so that we can make sure that they're answered and that we have quality applications coming in, because that's better for everybody when we can review the applications and approve them and move on, as opposed to trying to figure out what's wrong and help folks through the process. We are happy to do it, but it's obviously much easier for us to go through the process if we have good applications that have everything we need and are ready to be approved and ready to be funded. So.
John, we've got a few questions here I want to hit before we get off, and I know, again, they can always email to you, and again, appreciate your acknowledgement on the customer service piece too, because I think that was a frustrating part early on, was people not knowing what their status was or what they did wrong. So I appreciate the improvements that you've made there. There was a question about, do I have to have, if I'm a 1099 or I just have 1099 employees and don't have W-2 employees, am I eligible or not?
You are for every program except for the new business grant program. The new business grant program requires W-2 employees. Food and beverage, lodging, and entertainment venue do not.
Okay, great. And then we had another question in here that was asking, well, I think we covered them actually. John, do you see any other questions that I missed here that he did not address?
Yeah, John, thanks for the presentation. But there is another one here. Are these grant programs available to those businesses who already received grant support from other state programs, and for that matter, federal or local programs?
Yeah, absolutely. So even folks who received the small business relief grant, and we've actually kind of done 2 rounds of that program, one last fall and one that we're still kind of going through right now. If you received a small business relief grant, you're still eligible for these programs. Now, if you received a small business relief grant, you're not eligible for the new small business relief grant, because logically there's no way that would work. But otherwise, yes, there's no restriction on being able to access these funds if you have previously received state, local, or federal coronavirus relief funding.
And the timeline on these grants, you talked about the timeline for application, but does all this money have to be dispersed from from the state by the end of this year in accordance with other CARES money, or can it go longer?
As of right now, that is what we are being advised by our Office of Budget and Management, yes.
So that means, get your applications in now, make sure we have time to get them processed, because 30 days plus out, we're now in September by the time you get the dollar. So we want to make sure that people apply as soon as they can. And again, John and his team are available to help you with that. It sounds like in any way that you need some help.
Absolutely.
Any questions that folks have before we close out here today?
Yeah, there's one more. You may have touched on this, but an additional nuance. So one of the attendees, they opened in January of 2020, but they were established before that. Are they eligible for the new small business grant program?
Yeah, John, maybe talk through that a little bit. You went through that pretty quickly, but how are we verifying when they opened for that new small business grant program?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's a good point and something good to spend a little bit more time on. So we definitely recognize again that there are businesses that might do things in preparation for opening their business that might make it seem like they didn't open when they did. So because of that, again, you're only required to attach one document. There are 5 different types of documents that we will accept to basically prove that a business opened in calendar year 2020. So any one of these 5 documents, if you have one of them that shows a calendar year 2020 date, we will accept it and we will be able to move forward with your application. 1 is Secretary of State registration sometime in calendar year 2020. 2 is a certificate from the BWC upon hiring your first employee in calendar year 2020. 3 is a vendor's license registration sometime in calendar year 2020. 4 is commercial activity tax registration and filing your first report sometime in calendar year 2020. And 5 is establishment of a business bank account along with proof of first deposit in sometime in calendar year 2020. So absolutely, you might have a circumstance where you have a business that registered with the Secretary of State on December 19th of 2019 because they were just getting ready, they were excited, they wanted to get their business up and running. As long as they provide one of those other 4 documents that showed a date in calendar year 2020, then they'd still be okay, even if they registered prior to that. So I guess what I'm trying to say is even if you fail one of those 5 documents, it doesn't mean that you can't use one of the other ones, right? So we only ask for one. Send us the one that shows sometime in calendar year 2020.
That's great. Thank you for clarifying that, because that's going to be especially for new businesses, a sticky one. We saw that a lot in our grant programs in terms of when they start. Great. Well, if there are no additional questions, I want to again thank you, John Workman, for your information and the resources here. Thanks to Director Mahalik for joining us, and I want to say a special thank you, John, to the team that you have heads down right now reviewing applications, because we know firsthand how crazy some of those are and how hard that is to do. And everybody is appreciative of the work. Sometimes we don't always sound it when we're calling in asking those hard questions, but we appreciate what you're doing and what you're trying to help our business get back on their feet. With that, again, we'll say thank you. Have a great day. We will be posting this recording up in our YouTube and on our website, as well as making the slides available. They're within the recording, but all the slides and information are also at the links that are in the chat. So if you haven't yet and you want some of those links, you can certainly get them later, but go ahead and just do a cut and paste of the chat into your Word, where just, select it all, copy it, and you can copy it right into a Word document for yourself so you have that. But again, this will be part of what we put up on our website. And if you are I see a number of financial advisors and others who help and support small businesses, get this out to your people. We don't want them to miss out on this. There is a lot of availability yet, and we want to make sure they get the resources that they need. So I'll have a great day, a great weekend ahead, and we look forward to talking with you, helping you in any way that we can. Thank you all.
Thank you.